Hey everybody.
Fatbirdfinds here.
I'm Mary Beth.
And I'm Laura.
And I'm Nikki.
How's it going, everybody?
It's great.
Good.
Here we are again.
Welcome to episode 2 of Madmen. This is exciting.
I'm excited.
Yes.
Are you excited?
Yes. You stole my line.
Okay, so if you're brand new here, we'll just briefly introduce our channel. We're fatbirdfinds. We are vintage resellers. We have a YouTube channel. We would love for you to come over, if you're listening in podcast land, to come over and listen on YouTube as well. We will be throwing up some screenshots on YouTube to correspond with our podcast. So we would invite you to come over, subscribe if you're having a good time. We do a Friday night show on YouTube called Flippin' and Sippin'.
That's a good time.
Yeah, it is. Where we have a drink, we celebrate the weekend, and we have a good time.
We sell some stuff.
We do. All right, guys. Shall we get into episode 2? This is season 1, episode 2 of Mad Men.
Absolutely.
Ladies' room. Okay, so guys, how do we begin?
Go ahead, Nikki.
Well,
Go ahead, Nikki.
I mean, it opens up on just a shot of eggs, right?
It does.
Yeah. So we don't know exactly what's happening immediately. We know that eggs are being cracked, and then the shot opens up, and here we are in a restaurant looking at the back of Don Draper's head again.
Yes.
Just like in episode 1.
I'm pretty sure that what you're seeing right now is the first time we see Don in the episode, of course, from the back.
And we realize, if you didn't realize or you didn't know, that they're doing a tableside preparation of Caesar salad. So they're making the Caesar dressing there with raw egg yolks.
Mm-hmm.
And
Is that fancy?
I guess so.
I've never heard of that before in my entire life.
Yeah, it's kind of fancy, but it's really old school. They do that. You know where they do that? When we went to Vegas and we were looking at restaurants to eat at, there's that mobster restaurant that was really really popular and famous, and that was one of the dishes they were famous for, was a tableside Caesar salad where they make the dressing there, which is what the mobsters would have, expected back in the day, in this day.
Okay.
So anyway, that's what they're doing. They're having a fancy dinner.
Yep. So we've got our main characters. We've got Don, along with his wife Betty, and we've got Roger and Mona. Mona is Roger's wife as well. So the 4 of them, they're just sitting around chatting about nannies. Actually, they're chatting about Roger's nannies that took care of him when he was growing up, and the conversation sort of shifts over to Don, and he's like, Don, did you have a nanny? And he's like, no, I don't like to talk about myself.
Yeah.
He's like, I just was a baby in a basket.
Oh, yeah, like Moses, he says.
What's the quote, Laura?
Yeah, what's Roger's quote?
I mean, I love Roger so much. It's just ridiculous. And then Roger proposes a toast when they get to the end of the story or whatever. And he says, to Moses and Don Draper, a couple of princes.
Roger has the best quotes in the entire series, hands down.
Yeah.
Or Pete. It's a tie. But Roger's probably a little bit better.
You quote Pete more.
That's probably true. So during this conversation, which is important because we'll reference it later, Roger does reference that his daughter Margaret has seen a psychiatrist. So he says something to the effect of, she was the last girl in the building to see a psychiatrist or something like that. So I just want to note that because it will come up later.
It'll come up later.
Yeah, and he's trying to say that it's a new trendy thing to do,
right?
Like to go see the psychiatrist.
It wasn't that she was, having a really tough time. He said it was something like she didn't want to get up out of bed, before noon or something. Which who knows what that's about. We don't really know a lot about Margaret until much later in the series.
True.
And she does have some problems.
So then we transition. The girls get up. They need to go powder their noses. So they take a trip to the
ladies' room.
Ladies' room. So
the first of a few.
Yeah, we have 3 scenes in quote unquote ladies' rooms in this episode. So this is the first of those. Go ahead, Laura.
Well, I was just going to say, can we just touch on the fact that, ladies' room is the title of the episode, but also, I mean, it's just like, it's not only literal, the whole episode is about all the women and the behind the scenes of the women's lives and that kind of thing.
True.
So it gets represented in the show by the scenes in the restroom, in the ladies' room, but
yeah,
it means there's more behind it than that.
Agree.
And right before we get to this scene here, they were sitting at the table at the restaurant and they were talking about nannies. And Don says he never had a nanny, or, well, he doesn't want to talk about himself. And Betty is realizing that she doesn't know if Don had a nanny.
Yeah.
And then just briefly after that, after she makes that realization kind of to herself, she gets up, excuses herself to the restroom. And this is where she has an issue. She has a little episode that apparently has been happening off and on with her hands.
Yeah. So she's like clenching her hands and like shaking them. So you can tell that she's having some sort of something, like something's wrong.
She's numb in her hands and she can't put on her lipstick. And so Mona helps her with her lipstick.
Yeah. And she's like, do you ever get this where your hands go numb? And Mona's like, no, I don't.
It's a great scene. I love this scene.
Okay.
Mona is kind of like taking her under her wing, but you know that Mona is like, I mean, look how beautiful Betty Draper is, right?
Oh yeah.
They cast them. I mean, it's a known fact in the script and everything. She and Dawn are cast to be like exceptionally beautiful people.
Oh yeah.
And Mona is beautiful, but she's a little off the cutting edge. Look at Betty. Betty's got the latest lipstick, the latest dresses, the latest jewelry.
She literally looks like a Barbie, like an original
yeah.
Barbie. In this
I read
episode.
that she was cast specifically for her looks and specifically because she looks like Grace Kelly.
Oh yeah.
And Mona is, I mean, she's beautiful, and they didn't, you know, they took the time to make her look more like the boss's wife rather than to go on down that road and make her just as beautiful as Betty. Betty is the shining star of the moment here.
Definitely. So anyway, after she says, do you ever get this thing that happens with your hands when your hands go numb? And Mona's like, no, I don't. And so she's like, I need you to apply my lipstick. So Mona's applying her lipstick, and, you know, she's saying things like, you know, it's just so hard with the kids and everything. And then she's like, and I don't know if you know, but my mom passed away recently. And Mona's just kind of like, doesn't really say anything.
Crickets.
It's like she doesn't really know what to say. And from the background, you hear, I'm sorry. And so Betty like turns around with a smile on her face, like as if to say, oh, thank you for saying that. But actually it's a restroom attendant who is like, I'm sorry, but there are other women who need to use the mirror. And so she's like shushing them out of the way to get out of there so other women can use the mirror. And as they're leaving, the bathroom attendant says to her other friend, who's also a bathroom attendant, something like, gosh, if their purses get any smaller,
We're going to starve.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, of course, the restroom attendants are African-American and very stereotypical of the time. I don't really get bathroom attendants. I mean, what do they do? Do they refill the towels? What's happening in there?
I think so, but I rarely have ever been to a place that had them.
Yeah.
I think, does the Fox Theater have them?
Maybe in St. Louis?
Yeah.
Maybe.
But, I mean, just maybe once or twice in my lifetime have I seen a bathroom attendant. But I think so. I mean, I think they... it's kind of like the hotel concierge, you know what I mean? Like, I think they had like little mouthwashes sometimes and little toothpaste, or I mean, I don't know. I don't know what they have.
It's just so old fashioned
or something.
An aspirin.
I don't
Would
know
you like
exactly
an
what they
aspirin?
have.
Well, they police the mirror apparently. They
Yeah,
make sure
I guess in
everybody
this
gets
episode
mirror
they do.
time.
In this episode they do, and I mean, they just throw it right there in your face about
Yep.
the times and how women are treated
And,
at times.
and of course, Betty, it's not just how women are treated, because these are black women, and Betty and Mona do not tip
Correct.
their bathroom attendant, which is part of why they made that comment.
Correct. So then you transition to the ride home. So Betty and Dawn are... I'm sorry.
Can I interrupt?
Of
I have
course.
one thing that I would like to say before we leave the restaurant. I have an interesting fact.
Oh, I would love for you to interrupt.
Thank you. I have some historical facts.
Oh, good.
So, this restaurant, they briefly mention the restaurant, I think on the ride home when they're in the car, and Dawn is talking about the restaurant that Roger took them to, and he just kind of slurs through the name, and we were watching it, and we're like, what did he just say? And we had to turn on the subtitles to see the name, and even when we saw the words, I was like, is that English? I don't know what he just said.
And in fact, he said the name of the restaurant, and then it means Roger likes me.
Yeah, it means Roger likes me, and if he takes me to the Four Seasons, it means what? That he
Really likes me.
likes me or respects me or something. But this restaurant was called Toots Shore.
Toots.
Toots. Tootshor. And that's a name of a man who owned the restaurant.
Don't say toots.
Don't say Toots.
Well, I had to say Toots.
Can you, all these rich people with their ridiculous nicknames back in the 50s?
Maybe he was born with that name.
Maybe.
His name is Toots. Well,
not.
the Wikipedia article about him. Oh, you're right. It's Bernard.
Yeah.
Bernard Toots.
Sure. And he had this restaurant and lounge at 51 West 51st Street in Manhattan during the 40s and the 50s. It was known for its oversized circular bar, and it was frequented by celebrities, together with the 21 Club, the Stork Club, Delmonico's, and El Morocco. It was one of the places to see and be seen. And Joe DiMaggio frequented the place, as well as Jackie Gleason, Frank Sinatra, Judy Garland, Marilyn Monroe, Orson Welles, Yogi Berra, and Ernest Hemingway.
Nice.
Yeah, so there you go.
Nice facts.
I'm sure that Dawn had an affair with Marilyn Monroe, and they just didn't put it in the show.
Oh, all right.
Don't you think?
Well,
maybe so.
I mean, come on.
Not his type. He goes for those dark-haired ladies.
He
for whatever
does.
reason.
He does. All right. So now then we're transitioning on the ride home. Betty's a little drunk. She's just a little bit, and she's swooning all over him. She's like, basically, I love it when we go out. I love to see you that way, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And she's like leaning on him, but you can tell that she's had a little bit too much to drink because at one point she leans over to the other side of the car to try to get some air. So, she's just sort of swooning all over her place. And then we go to the bedroom scene where they get home. And then Betty asks the question again. So did you ever have a nanny? She's just realizing for herself that she doesn't really know a lot about him. And of course, we as the viewers don't know a lot about him yet, but it's becoming very obvious that she doesn't know him either. So, and then there's this scene where, they go to sleep and then it pans over to her in the middle of the night while Dawn's asleep. And she says to herself, who's in there? So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, she leans up and like that wouldn't wake him up.
And
but whatever.
Dawn says at some point in all of this, when she's asking about nannies, and that he was raised that talking about yourself was a sin of pride. Mm-hmm. So we're kind of getting the beginnings of some, psychological information about Dawn, that he doesn't talk about himself. He doesn't believe in talking. And so that leads us into like one of the major themes of this episode, which is psychiatry.
Yes. And let's not discount the fact here that in this scene, when she's looking over at him in the bed, that she's looking at the back of his head.
Of course.
Yes.
Always.
So I think that's really important to throw in there. All right. So it's the next morning. We're in the office. We see Joan and Peggy walking through the office. And they're on their way. Oh, actually, Joan says something about, well, now that we've got outfits down, we need to work on your accessories. So, I mean, that could mean her earrings, her necklace, a man. It could mean anything. So, but they're on their way to the ladies' room. So, they go into the ladies' room.
Our second ladies' room of the episode.
Yes, second
named
one.
ladies' room.
And we walk in, and there's a woman just sobbing. She is just sobbing in there. And Joan walks right past her. Peggy stops, and she's like, I think her name's Bridget. Oh my gosh, are you okay? And of course she says nothing, but she looks over at Joan, who we're seeing in a reflection in the mirror. And Joan just like throws her hands up, like, just leave her. Don't talk to her.
She's like, skip it, Peggy. Come on.
She's like, we don't have time for that, Peggy. But Joan's just very dismissive of this. And Peggy's obviously like really concerned about this lady. But Joan is just like, don't bother.
I mean, Peggy's never seen anything like this since she's never been in an office before. I mean, you and we would probably not be surprised to see someone crying in a ladies' room.
That's true.
Even today. But I guess this is Peggy's first time seeing somebody randomly crying in a ladies' room.
Have you guys ever done that?
Cried in the ladies' room?
Uh-huh.
I've cried in my office.
Like,
Cried
no,
in
I know, but in the ladies' room.
Maybe. I don't know.
I don't think.
I have.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm sure somebody has.
Well, I was teaching school, and you have to go somewhere. Like you can't be seen.
Yeah.
I just think it's kind of a similar thing. It's not like you've got your own private space.
Right.
Peggy doesn't.
Right. Yeah, I'm lucky in that fact. I just shut my door and have like my little meltdown and then go about my business.
But that shot though in the ladies' room with the mirrors was fantastic.
Yeah.
With we were seeing the back of Margaret. Is that her name?
Or
Bridget. Bridget's head, the back of her head, and her face in the mirror. And we see Peggy looking at her, and then we see Joan in another mirror looking back at Peggy. So Peggy's looking at Joan in a mirror, and she's looking at Bridget kind of in a mirror. And
yeah.
It's just a lot of mirrors.
Well, and I mean, one could say that that's symbolic of there's so many sides to a woman. You never know what's going on in their lives. You never know which side of the woman you're getting. You never know. There's lots that could be said about that scene.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so then on to Dawn's office.
Also,
we
notice that they have done some work on Peggy Olsen's appearance in this second episode of the show. In the first episode, the pilot, we commented that her bangs were kind of horrific, that her hairstyle was just kind of horrific. She looks a lot better, I think, in this one.
Oh, good.
They really, did some work.
Well, now that Peggy's bangs are better, let's take our first break. All right, so then we're going to go into Dawn's office, and the boys are all in there, and they're just like horsing around. They've got this right guard container of new deodorant, spray deodorant, and they're holding down Kenny, and they're just spraying him. I mean, it's like a frat house in that office, and everybody's just really horsing around and being ridiculous.
And they had also, isn't that the scene where they had also gotten a postcard from Pete?
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
Not yet.
Okay.
So then we get a knock at the door. Peggy comes in and introduces one of our other main characters that we've not met yet, and this is Bert Cooper. So the other half of Sterling Cooper. So in this picture right here, in the forefront, you've got Roger Sterling and then Bert Cooper.
I love that. Where'd you get that shot? Look at him. He looks so goofy.
He is sort of goofy.
I know. It's just... Yeah, he's walking around with no shoes on all the time.
Yeah, he's very eccentric. So when he opens the door and he sees all the horsing around, he says this great quote. He says, so much yarn, so little time. So I feel like that means, I feel like you could take that to mean like there's so much potential in here, but there's just not enough time to deal with it. Or, there's so many things I could say, but I don't have the strength. There's...
And it's just kind of nonsense. It's like, because we were watching the episode together, and it's like, what did he say? What does that mean?
So, you've got a quote on that.
Yeah, so we looked it up when we were talking about it, and in Matthew Weiner's exit interview, he says the following about that.
Okay.
About Bert Cooper. We knew that John Slattery, who's Roger,
right?
I think really had not committed to being in the show for longer than a season. I knew I needed to create more of a world here in case John Slattery didn't want to work here. I love the idea of telling the story of the generations. This would be someone who was Roger's father's age. Creating Cooper was just to have another authority figure in there to explain how big the agency was, too. The eccentricity of this man was something that you get when you hire Robert Morse. He said, quote, goody in the audition. And he said, quote, so much yarn, so little time, end quote. And I put it in the script.
So in addition to the yarn quote, he also says goody in this scene. So both of those quotes were put in the script, which I think is hilarious.
Yeah, it's so funny.
I feel like he's playing himself in this show. The whole show, Bert Cooper is Roger Morse.
Yeah.
So the point of this conversation with these three individuals is to talk about Nixon. So Kennedy, Nixon, presidential race, and Bert wants the agency to represent Richard Nixon. Mm-hmm. So that was the point of that conversation. And as he walks away, you see him walking away in sock feet, which he's just a very eccentric character who we'll learn more about as the series goes. All right, so next scene coming up, we've got Paul Kinsey approaching Peggy's desk. Peggy is opening a really sad sandwich, and
this is just packed. This episode.
Oh yeah,
They're
really
all
is
packed.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how we're gonna keep up this this pace, we're going to be talking for hours for every episode.
So Paul offers to take Peggy to lunch, and she's like, I really shouldn't. I think he's still in there, meaning Dawn. I really should man the phones, and Paul takes that, and he's like, okay, that's fine. But then Joan comes around, and she's like, that sandwich is sad, and she's looking at Peggy. She's like, get your things.
Oh, look, there's Peggy's hat with her little bangs fixed.
I mean, her bangs are still bad, but they're better than they were.
So she's like, get your things. We're going to go to lunch. So Joan offers to take Peggy to lunch, which is nice. So they're walking through, and they come into the break room. Oh, wait. I think I've messed up. I don't think I got a shot of the break room.
That's okay.
Sorry
So they
about
go
that.
into the break room. They go to lunch.
No, they go to the break room.
They go to the
first.
break room first. In the break room, they're all looking at a postcard. This is the postcard scene. So Pete Campbell, whom from the first episode we know that Peggy slept with Pete in that first episode. Now Pete is on his honeymoon. So there's a postcard
From Niagara Falls.
and it's addressed to Kenny. So Kenny's reading it, and he looks at the back, and he's like, greetings from the wettest place on earth. So all the boys in the break room are just hee-hawing over this postcard, of course, and they put it on the bulletin board in the break room. So they see Peggy and Joan walk through, and they're like, hey, can we take you guys to lunch? And Joan just plays it real cool, and she's like, oh, we hadn't even thought about eating. We were just going to go shopping, but sure. And she's like, yeah, we'll take you up on that. So
Yeah, she's so great.
so they end up going to lunch with these vulgar boys.
Oh, they're so rude.
They are so bad. So they're sitting around the lunch table, this booth, and they're just saying all these atrocious things to Peggy because, of course, Peggy's the new girl, and she's like getting all this shit. And like Kenny says something like, "Can I interest you in a 42 long?" And then that guy sitting beside her, we don't really know his name, but he's like, "That's not his pant length," or whatever. It's just like so ridiculous, and Peggy is just mortified. She hates it.
And even Joan, you can see Joan for just a second, even though she keeps her cool, she puts her cigarette out very determinedly, and when they say something super rude to Peggy, and she's like, okay, it's like the equivalent of peace out, we're out of here. We can't sit here any longer.
Right. And even as they're leaving, Kenny's like, hey, why don't you take the rest of the afternoon off? And she's like, I've got to go to work.
And he touches her.
Yeah, he corners her and like is all up on her.
Yeah, they're like, I've got stuff to do. So then they go back to the office. Peggy's at her desk again, and Paul just happens to come by, and he's like, thanks a lot. I thought you weren't going to go to lunch. And she's like, it just kind of happened last minute. And he like throws down some things. He's like, these are for Dawn. I need him to look at this. But he's nice about it. He goes, you can look at it too.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah. Paul's not, out of all of them, he's maybe the least bad.
Yeah, maybe. He's still kind of bad, but it's fine. It'll be okay. It works out for Peggy. All right, so then we transition to Betty's house. So Betty is hanging out with her pal Francine, and they are.
I love me some Francine.
They are gabbing. You're not really supposed to say gabbing. It's like sort of anti-feminist to say gabbing. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah, it is. There you
Oh.
go.
Who says these things?
Well, it's just like a stereotypical thing that women do, quote unquote.
Well, if I
that
said
they're
they were-
sitting around gabbing.
If I said they were sitting around gossiping, which is also a stereotypical thing that women do,
I guess that's true.
I mean,
I guess that's true. But they are sitting there and they are smoking and having, I think, coffee or tea or something. And, they're just talking about whatever. They are on the topic, however, of a new person who has moved in down the street. And Francine's like, do you know who's moving in down the street? And Betty's like, no. And she's like, it's this woman named Helen Bishop. And Betty's like, is she an old lady? Like, why would anybody move in to a house by themselves?
yeah, it's not Helen Bishop. It's not the Bishops. It's just Helen Bishop.
So we realize that this woman is moving in. She has a young boy and a baby, and she is divorced. Which Betty's like, it's awful, or Francine says it. It's awful.
I mean, I don't think that you guys probably don't even remember that being so bad. But I mean, it did. It was just so you were just so shunned as a divorcee.
Yeah.
So then we get our next big shock of this episode. Francine's like, it's too quiet in there, and she stands up to look for her kid, and lo and behold, she's pregnant.
Yeah.
Just puffing away on that cigarette. And the next scene is hilarious. They're like yelling for the kids to come in. They're like, why are you guys so quiet? And we see Sally. Sally with this damn garment bag, this plastic garment bag over her head, like they're pretending
They're playing
like,
spaceman.
yeah. And Betty's like, Sally Draper, get over here this instant. And so you imagine, of course, that she's going to take that plastic bag off of her baby before she suffocates. And Betty's like, she says something like, if my clothes from that bag are just, she's worried about her clothes.
Yeah.
Sally Draper, if I go upstairs and dry cleaning is in the floor, you're going to be one sorry young lady.
Yeah, so she just looks real pitiful. And then in this picture, even, she's like inhaling this plastic. So she just walks away with the plastic bag over her head. It's just so funny, the things like that they put in this show.
And Sally's killing it from the beginning, too. She's quite the little actress.
Sally's the best.
Yeah, it's amazing that actress grows up on this show.
Yes. So then we transition to a scene where Betty is driving the car. The kids are like bouncing around in the car. They're like flailing from the front seat to the back seat. It's chaotic. Nobody has a seatbelt on or a car seat.
No.
What would that look like?
No.
So then...
Oh, can I add something?
Yeah.
When my brother and I used to ride around in the car with my mom, I was about Sally's age and he was little, like 2. I would ride in the front seat, no seat belts, no car seats. And I would ride in the front seat on my knees with my feet against the passenger door.
Oh, Lord.
Because I wanted to see him and what was going on. And he would stand. There was no sitting for him because he wanted to see what was going on. So he would stand right up next to my mom who was driving, and she would just like pin him in with her shoulder. And I mean, that was that. I mean,
Yeah.
that was all there was.
So for reference, for the time period, you are probably Sally or Bobby's age. For reference.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sally's a little bit older than me, but
Got you.
not by much.
So you're like between Bobby and Sally's age. Okay, I got you. All right, so they're flailing around in the car. They drive past this driveway. It's somebody moving in, and then we realize that it's this single woman. It's Helen Bishop moving into this house all alone. And so Betty,
Yeah,
like...
Helen's out there struggling to move in the stuff. She's got boxes and she's doing it all by herself.
Yep. No man in sight, of course. And so Betty starts to have this episode again. Her hands are seizing up. She's like gripping them really tight and she's shaking them. And then she has an accident.
Yeah, she loses control of the car.
And I mean, let's be honest. She's not going real fast.
No.
She's just bebopping down the road.
She just knocks the top of the bird bath off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In her own yard.
Yeah, so it's not the worst thing ever. So she has this little wreck in this yard, and anyway, she gets her bearings about her, and then she goes and checks on the kids. She's like, oh God, the kids. It's sort of an afterthought for her, really. She doesn't think about them right away. But she goes and opens the back door, and they're just like playing in the floorboard and like
They're
cracking
laughing.
up. So the kids are fine. Betty had a little episode, but she's okay.
Yeah, and just, brilliantly written in the episode at the same time that this is happening to Betty.
Yep.
Then Dawn, we figure out, is in bed with Midge.
Right.
Yeah.
So these things are happening simultaneously. They get out of bed together. Dawn looks over and sees a television set. And he's like, where'd you get that TV? And she's like, I just got it. And he's like, yeah, but where? And like, he's like real put out about it. And he's like, I thought you were like too good for TV. Like, you're bohemian and you don't need a TV. And anyway, so Midge goes on and she's like, well, I just got it. I don't want to tell you where I got it. I just got it. And then she goes on to say something like, have you seen this show? Is it called People Are Funny? Mm-hmm. She's like, have you seen this show, People Are Funny? And you can tell there's this like expression on Dawn's face when she starts to talk about this TV episode. It's like he's lost complete interest in her, one. And two, I think it's like some sort of disdain. Like he hates that she's talking about something other than him. I think that he is just really put out about it, and she notices that he's put out about it. And then she goes and picks up this TV set and just like hurls it out her window, which is hilarious.
It's so funny.
Like she doesn't even give it a second thought. And
She's like, fine.
you hear it crashing and people yelling down below, and they're like, "Hey!" And so anyway, she's like, "Are you happy now?" And he's like, "Yes." Yes, I think I am.
Yeah, I think so. I think
So
that'll do it.
She showed him. All right, it's time for our second break. We'll be right back. All right.
Oh, my notes.
Oh,
I feel
my
like I'm
notes.
in class.
I know we've
It's
got
so
lots.
great.
We've got lots of notes. In case you didn't know, we've all got our little notebooks here. So after that scene, we have Dawn coming home, Betty serving dinner.
Which is fish sticks.
Fish sticks. Who doesn't love a good fish stick?
Everybody loves fish sticks.
So the kids are eating their fish sticks and milk.
They're excited. Like, Daddy, guess what? We went to the hospital today. They gave us lollipops. Like, oh, God.
Yeah. And Betty's just sitting there like, yeah. And anyway, he does ask her, he's like, "How are you? You know, are you okay?" And she's like, "I'm fine. You know, they checked me out, whatever."
I mean, ironically, he's pretty sweet to her. I mean,
he is right here. In a few minutes, he's real shitty. But right here, he's pretty nice.
Okay.
He tells the kids to go watch TV. But here in just a second, when they go over to wash the dishes or whatever they're doing at the sink, he's kind of shitty. So right after this scene, they go over to the sink. And, you know, she's trying to explain to him, you know, her hand's messed up again. She doesn't feel right. You know, maybe I should talk to somebody. And he is like...
He's like, "No, talk to somebody." What?
Yeah.
What do you mean talk?
Yeah. He says, "Yeah, I hate the way you drive." Let's see. He's really agitated.
I think he says that in a sweet kind of way, though.
Maybe.
He's being sweet to her. You know, it's like, "Oh, I hate the way you drive." I mean,
But it escalates pretty quickly.
Well, they start talking about how this has happened before. It's not an isolated incident, and that she has seen a doctor before that he thinks is a quack, and that the doctor, they did dye tests, which I assume that's like a CAT scan of some kind,
Maybe.
or something, but it didn't show anything physically wrong with her, and that's why Dawn thinks he's a quack, because there's obviously something wrong with Betty. And it can't be the only thing it could be is physical, because he doesn't believe in there being anything mentally wrong with somebody.
Yeah.
You know, that would cause that kind of reaction. They don't understand at this time about anxiety attacks, panic attacks, and things like that. So anyway, he's like, "Of course there's something wrong with you. We just need to find you a better doctor." And then she said to him that the doctor at the hospital seemed really good and she liked him, and he suggested that she talk to somebody.
Yeah. But then, you know, it escalates a little bit, and then he's like, "Leave the dishes for the girl."
Yeah, he didn't like that.
Meaning?
He was done with that conversation.
well, yeah, but I think it meant more than that. I think it was a dig at, you know, I provide enough around here that you can have somebody to do the dishes for you. You don't have to do the dishes yourself. You know,
I got you.
You know, why aren't you? You know, you're happy. I'm giving you all of this life.
I got you.
You know, don't do the dishes. Leave the dishes for the girl to do.
Yeah, maybe so.
Yeah.
So then we go to the bedroom. He's doing push-ups, which I think is really funny, and he's like counting 8, 9, 10. And
Oh my gosh, that picture of Dawn.
And when do you like that?
He's so handsome in that picture.
And then anyway, when Betty walks by, he like transitions 98, 99, which I think is really funny. But he gets in bed with her, and she's like, "You know, it doesn't have as much stigma today as it used to." And looking back on it though today, I'm sure that was true at the time, but there was a huge stigma about psychiatry or therapy until like the 70s. I mean,
Oh yeah.
even today in some places.
I mean, it's
Oh,
only
definitely.
become mainstream like since probably COVID, because everybody went nuts from being quarantined at home for a couple of years, and so now we talk about therapy like it's nothing. Like
Right.
there's signs up all over the workplace, like, "Here, be sure to call this number if you need to talk to somebody," and it's just completely normal. But I mean, in my lifetime, it hasn't been completely normal.
And if you really pause to think about it, just, I mean, it was, I mean, obviously we reiterate this all the time, but it's at such a different time. The men really were responsible for the money that came in and out of the house, and so therefore your status in life. And it really did seem like a reflection on them if you were to be so miserable and unhappy with your life, because they're providing that life.
Yeah, and that's a good segue into probably what you're going to say, Dawn's speech in this scene, which is important.
Yeah, so in that scene, he's a lot nicer than he was at the dishes. He's put on a happier face. He cuddles up next to her, and he says, I always thought people saw a psychiatrist when they're unhappy.
In other words, you can't need a psychiatrist, because how could you be unhappy?
Right.
Because you have everything. And he goes on to say, I look at this, everything we have, and I look at them, meaning the kids, and I look at your pretty face. And how could anybody be unhappy?
How could you, in your situation, possibly be unhappy? Mm-hmm. And so he's gaslighting her a little bit. You know, he's making her feel undeserving of needing help. You know, in his own way, even though he may not be doing it on purpose.
That's my contention. He's not doing that on purpose.
But he's such a narcissist.
I like Dawn.
We know.
I like Dawn, so I have to take up for him here and there.
We all are aware.
He can't be horrible all the way through the whole thing.
Oh, yeah,
I like him too, Laura, but I think he's such a narcissist that he doesn't realize that he's doing it.
Correct.
Yeah. It's normal to him.
Yes.
He doesn't realize that she is hurting in other ways.
I agree with that.
Yeah, and I think he's, just trying to subtly convince her to change her own mind.
Yes.
Yep. All right, next scene. We're in Dawn's...
She says, whatever you think is best.
Yeah,
that's the way she ends that.
Yeah. It's so funny. I love going back and rewatching this show from the beginning, because we just got done watching
the whole thing.
The whole thing all the way to the very end, and every character has a great story arc, and Betty's, is great too, and hers is so dramatic because she ends up just being just like this raging bitch. I mean, she is just scary.
Spoiler alert.
Terrifying. Like, you don't want to be in a room with her because you don't know what she's going to say. She's going to fly off the handle any minute. And in these first couple of episodes of the show, she is like a pussycat. I mean, she is so timid. Whatever you say, honey, she won't even go to the doctor for herself.
She is timid, but she is not, in the way she is now, is not super unlike the way she becomes, but she's always got it in her. So I'm going to point that out here in a second.
Yeah, that's probably why her hands, that's probably what's happening. I mean, I know it's supposed to be a panic attack that's happening.
She's always got that manipulative side to her.
I think it's the inside of her trying to come out.
Maybe.
It's like forcing its way out. It's battling its way out. And it's like she's trying to hold it back, trying to be the good girl. And the pressure, the force of all that rage trying to come out is coming out in her hands.
Maybe so. All right, let's transition to the next scene. We're in Dawn's office, and they're doing a right guard pitch. So Sal has drawn up some artwork. Paul is pitching copy. And they're coming up with these pitches having to do with like spacemen. So I think that the ad says the new right guard aerosol works in my suit and yours, and so they're pitching these different ideas, and Dawn is just really dismissive of all of them. He hates them.
Yeah, we're gonna get a scene here of Dawn's advertising genius.
Yes,
and he points out that their approach to this is what would make a man feel cool. Like, what does a man want to feel like when he uses right guard? He wants to be cool like an astronaut.
Right.
But Dawn and his genius points out that women are the ones shopping for the deodorant. A woman is going to buy this for her man, and what does she want?
Right. So he's like, maybe she wants a cowboy. He always brings the cattle home safe.
Yeah, well, he's just really, he goes off on another level tangent, a bi-level kind of tangent here, where he's talking about the ad, and this is an example of where he's talking about himself too, where he's trying to figure out, it's part of this overarching mystery of Dondraper. Who is he, and his mysterious past, and why is he the way he is? And he's thinking out loud about what do women want? And, you know, the guys think he's talking about in relation to their deodorant ad, but he's thinking, he's talking to himself. He's like, you think they want the strong, reliable cowboy who brings the cattle home, which is what he had been trying, like how he sees himself as being the provider, the protector, the man of the relationship. But maybe they have a secret wish and they want something else, and you don't know what that is, and he's trying to figure out what that is. And so in other words, he's trying to sell deodorant. He's also trying to sell himself as Don Draper.
Well, isn't that brilliant writing? I mean,
Yeah.
So we're in the second episode of the series. Of course, there's been a lot of time since the pilot episode, so you're almost redo. I mean, some of the characters you never even seen yet, you know, like Betty and stuff like that. And it's just a brilliant way to promote the mysterious background of Don Draper.
Right. So the quote when he's like staring off into space and getting lost in himself is, you know, maybe inside there's some mysterious wish that we're ignoring. You know, maybe Betty wishes to see a therapist and I'm ignoring it. So there is that. All right. So next scene, Peggy and Paul. So Peggy and Paul are taking a stroll through the office. Oh, wait. I missed one. Let me go back a slide.
What did you miss?
The when they're getting the sandwich at the cart. So it's still Peggy and Paul, but I wanted to touch on this really quickly because I think it's important. Peggy and Paul. Paul offers, Paul's really. I'm sorry, I got lost. Paul is really down because Don didn't like his copy, and so he stops and talks to Peggy, and he's like, "Well, better luck next time. You know, woe is me. Buy me a sandwich." And so they go to the sandwich cart. So this is where they are at the sandwich cart buying a sandwich. And I think this is really interesting.
Yeah. So Paul, we're kind of being introduced to Paul, and we find out over the course of, you know, a couple seasons what kind of guy he is. And this is the beginning of showing us that he wants to be cool. He wants to be hip. He wants to be progressive. And at this time, being progressive means that you are, you are compassionate and empathetic to the civil rights.
To the cause.
To the movement.
Yeah.
And so even though he's a white man, he feels like, you know, he wants to be seen like he's one of the black guys. So he walks up to this black guy at the cart here, and he says to the guy, you look sadder than a map.
Sadder than a map.
And that, referring to his drape, your drape is sadder than a map. And, you know, who knows what that means, but we looked it up, and that is jive, which, jive, language that was popular at the time, which is kind of the precursor to what today is the AAVE, the African American Vernacular English. And so he's trying to, be cool like that.
He's trying to fit in,
He's trying to talk the talk. And the dude, he's just like, he's trying to be polite, but he is just like grossed out. And he's like, Mr. Kinsey, you sure can talk, Mr. Kinsey. That's what he says.
He's like, well, he tells him why he has to wear it. He's like, well, because I got to wait on your ass.
Yeah.
I got to serve you sandwiches. That's why I got to wear it.
He's like, well, it makes me feel like I'm at work. I'm in my uniform.
Yeah.
I don't know what you want me to say. So anyway, I just think that's
cringe.
interesting.
It was just like an early form of cringe.
Yes.
But you would have to kind of know the lingo to pick up on that joke.
That's true. So then Peggy and Paul take a tour really through the hallways of the office. And the tour is not so much for Peggy. It's really for us, the audience, to try to get an understanding of who answers to whom in the workplace, where the offices sort of are located. So we get an understanding that the admin or the account guys, bring in the business. The copywriters write the copy. They give it to the art department. So we're getting sort of the workflow. I did want to stop on this slide specifically. If you'll look in the background of this slide, you'll see a piece of artwork. So this, I believe that this is a brutalist piece. So you saw this a lot in the mid-century. A lot of times they were made out of like nails, metal panels. Sometimes they were just metallic colored. Sometimes they were in full color like this one is in the background. I don't know the artist in particular on this piece, but it is reminiscent of some Curtis Jerry. That's spelled Jere, Curtis Jerry. And if you can find a signed original Curtis Jerry piece, those are, bringing up to thousands of dollars.
Did you know sometimes it's C. Jerry?
Yes.
And people don't, I mean, you have to look it up to know to pronounce it that way. And it's really two different people. It's Curtis and Jerry.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I thought the dude's name was Curtis Jerry.
No.
Laura, you've taught me something.
Yes.
How about
Correct.
that? I like when you teach me something. That's fantastic. So,
And you know what I have written down for this scene?
what?
I have written down, Paul and his mad vernacular skills. I mean, he's like still doing it, like
Yeah.
talking to Peggy all the way through the office, saying that ridiculous
Yeah, he
stuff.
said something else like dig it. Yeah,
Yeah.
He's
You
like
dig?
He's like dig it, do you dig?
That's funny. All right, so then we transition to Roger in Dawn's office. So Roger and Dawn are having a conversation, and this is where I wanted you guys to know about the psychiatrist comment at the very first scene. Roger was a little drunk, and he offered the information that his daughter Margaret had seen a psychiatrist, and so Dawn brings it up casually. He's like, "Did you say that Margaret had seen a psychiatrist?" And Roger's like, "I think you're probably mistaken about that." Like,
He's just kidding.
we don't talk about that. So, you think he was kidding?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't.
Oh, I don't either.
Oh, no. I think he was kidding.
No,
Oh,
I
I
think
don't.
he was saying
No, he's that much of a smart ass. He knows that he heard him.
No, I know, but I think that
He's saying we're not going to talk about that, and I shouldn't have said it. Is what he's
yeah,
saying.
I think that's what he's saying
He's
too.
saying I was
Well-
too drunk and I shouldn't have said that, and I wish he'd forget it.
I don't think so. I
Oh.
disagree because they go on. You see in the
They
scene
do.
they go on to talk about it, and he goes on to say, yeah.
He was so straight faced when he said it. He was so straight. He's like,
Well,
I
that's the
think
way
you're.
he does.
No, he usually makes. You can tell a joke in his voice when he's doing a joke. He's like, I think you're mistaken about that.
Okay.
Maybe
Okay.
so.
I think you're mistaken about
Okay,
that.
Boy, we can't, go to the mattresses on this.
We're gonna agree to disagree on that one. But you never know. You never know what was intended there.
So, put what you think about it in the comments below.
All right, we're gonna take our third and final break, and we're gonna go ahead.
I was just going to say that I loved his statement at the end of that. He says, psychiatry is just this year's candy pink stove. He's talking about it's just the newest thing out, the latest craze. That's why his daughter goes to the psychiatrist. It's what everybody wants to do.
I got you.
Just like everybody wants a candy pink stove, which I think is really
That's
cool.
cute.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that. All right, third and final break, and we're gonna wrap it up right after this.
And we're back. So, Laura, you just said the candy pink stove, like psychiatry, it's the newest fad. So that ties in with kind of the theme of the episode, and the theme of the whole show is, Don Draper and advertising, and him teaching us about advertising, and which is, he tells us in the first episode, is advertising is based on one thing, which is happiness. And in this episode, he's trying to figure out what can make Betty happy, because if she needs to go to a psychiatrist, it must be because she's unhappy, and so maybe psychiatry would make her happy because it's something to consume, like a candy pink stove. It's something that can be bought for her to make her happy, because happiness is buying something, and advertising is linked to happiness. And so
Right.
he's like, how can I make sense of this in the framework of capitalism, basically?
Right. So then we go home. Dawn comes home. The kids, coincidentally, are watching People Are Funny, which is
I
the
think
show
that's
that
funny.
Midge referenced earlier.
Have we seen the scene with Midge in the hallway?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. But let's see. So Dawn, Betty's trying to get dinner ready. She's trying to put dinner on the table. And Dawn comes in there and gifts her with a watch. So she...
Trying to buy her happiness.
Yes, so he puts this beautiful watch on her wrist with a face small enough that you have to be young to look at it.
My
or
God, what a
read
line. Swoon. I mean, he is all about her in this scene.
Yes.
And she sits in his lap Oh my God.
Yes. So, but the scene quickly turns. So this is what I was talking about earlier. So the scene quickly turns and she sits down in her chair and she starts to get upset. So then she starts really talking really morbidly. She's talking about Sally and the wreck that they had earlier. And she's like, I just keep thinking about Sally and what would have happened if she had like disfigured her face. What if she had had a bad scar on her? Oh, she says that she noticed that Sally has a bruise on her face. And she's like, what if it had been really bad? What if it had been a scar? What if she, worse than dying?
Yeah.
Like, who cares if I would have killed her? What would have been worse is if she would have had to have gone through her whole life with a huge scar on her face.
I mean, she said that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
she said because that means she would have been alone.
Yeah.
That was the point she was getting at.
And so Dawn is just standing there, like behind her, like with this horrified look on her face. Like, what the hell is wrong with you? That's crazy. Why are you thinking about that? And she's just really upset and she's crying. But it's my opinion, it's my thought that she is acting that hysterical to get her way. She's doing that. She is just as manipulative as he is, but she knows she is. That's the difference. I don't think Dawn knows how manipulative he is at some points, but she knows.
Well, she is very childlike, which
Yes.
is something we'll explore a lot throughout the show. And this is an example of that. She knows to throw a tantrum to get her way.
Yeah. So
I mean, she's basically is a child. She's basically probably the age of my daughter. I mean, she's young in this show.
So you can see, Don's tune starts to shift. He's like, you can see all these thoughts on his face as he's like looking around in disbelief and he looks down at her and kisses the top of her head. You can tell that he's like changing his tune about it. All right, next scene. This is the scene that you just asked about. It's Dawn and Midge in the hallway. So Dawn has taken Betty to the doctor. He mentions that she's seeing the doctor, and I think that they're staying in the city that night, and he's called in sick.
Yeah, and here we touch back onto the theme of happiness again. He's still trying to figure it out. He doesn't understand. He doesn't understand women, and he doesn't understand what makes them happy, if not things. So he notices that Midge is happy, I guess, even though she really has nothing to be happy about. I mean, she has no family, no man, and no money, and she's just living in this kind of terrible, it's a great apartment, but it's not in a great place.
Right.
So he asks her, he says, why are you so happy? Is it because you have everything or because you have nothing? And so he's trying to work it out. He's trying to figure out, he's trying to change his tune. Maybe it's not about buying her everything. Maybe I don't need everything. Maybe it would be better if we all had nothing, or if it all just went away, I guess.
Yeah, maybe so.
That was my quote pick of the episode.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Say it again.
Well, he says to Midge, I can't decide if you have everything or nothing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're unaware, if this is the first time you're listening to us, we're doing this thing where we like to rename the episode. So the name of this episode is Ladies' Room. So here in a moment, we'll give you all of our picks for the retitleization of the episode. So that one's Laura's.
No, that was my quote.
Oh, I'm
that
sorry.
wasn't my name of the episode.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood you.
That's okay.
My fault.
That's okay.
You
That's kind of too long for a title.
Will you forgive me?
Yes.
Thanks. All right. So after that scene, we go back to Peggy, who's at work. And she goes into Paul's office. And so I can't remember why she goes into Paul's office.
Maybe something to give him, I think.
Maybe something to give him. Maybe she was thanking him for lunch in the tour. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think she did. I think she went and thanked him for lunch.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
So anyway, Paul comes on to her. He tries to kiss her. He's like, we can move the couch up against the door. Everybody's going to be going to lunch here pretty soon. And she's like, Paul, I think you've misunderstood. And he goes, he says something like, dang, I don't even like to sit in Dawn's chair. Like, shit, I've just like stepped over and this is Dawn's girl. Like, he makes the assumption that she's with him, which I think is interesting.
While comparing her to a chair.
That's funny. That's very funny. So she's horrified. She doesn't like it. She gets out of there very quickly.
Well, and she says, well, as she's getting out of there, he kisses her, and she doesn't want to kiss him back, and he's confused, and he said, "Oh, do you belong to somebody?" And she doesn't say anything.
I think she says yes.
Well, at the very end she does, but at the very end he's like, "You do belong to somebody, right?"
Yeah, that's what he says.
He needed reassurance that he was being rejected only because there was someone else in her life, because there's no reason why if she's single, that she would reject him. And so he's like, "You do belong to somebody, right?" And she said yes, just to get him to leave her alone.
So Peggy's back at her desk, and she's just like really put out. She gets her typewriter cover out and puts it over her typewriter. Joan walks up and she's like, "You do know that covering up your typewriter is code for you. I'm done for the day."
Look at Joan's sassy pose in this.
Yeah, I picked that on purpose. It's pretty good, isn't
so
it?
funny.
So Peggy's like, I really don't feel well. And Joan's
Swell.
like, I really don't feel all that swell. And Joan's like, yeah, neither do I. Look at this correspondence. So she hands her the stack of papers, and she says, "You've made all these mistakes. I need you to fix them like as soon as possible." And Peggy, is a little snitty. And Joan's like, "I don't like your attitude."
Look at you all in a snit.
Yeah. So they have a few words back and forth, which are funny. I can't help but like Joan, even though she is a total bitch. But I really like her. She's one of my favorites. So anyway, so Peggy's like, "Fine, I'll do it." And she decides that she's going to do the work. So does she look in her drawer first?
Yeah.
And then all the men, is that
No,
when that
all the men
happens?
come by first.
Okay. So before this scene that you're seeing with the card, all these men, you see this montage of men walking by her desk in slow motion. And they're all, I apologize for that. We had a knock at the door. So I may not pick up exactly where I was, but we get a slow montage of all these men walking across the floor in front of Peggy's desk. And they're all looking at her like a piece of meat. They just like want to devour her. And
They're on
she
the
is
prowl.
and she is so put out. Like her face when they
It's
walk by.
it's like on purpose overdone. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
it was
yeah.
ridiculous.
And they're all looking her up and down. Even gay
Yeah.
Sal walks by, and it's more of a admiration for her outfit or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah,
He like
right.
look at her shoes, and he's like, nice. So anyway, then we get
She's dejected by all that.
yes. So then we see her open her side drawer, and there's that postcard from Pete.
She stole it.
Yes, greetings from the wettest place on earth, which is what I would rename the episode. So that is my vote for the renaming of the episode, greetings from the wettest place on earth. And Laura, you want to take that away?
Oh yeah, and then so we all are going to pick up something to highlight in the episode that is of the period, and I happened to see the Scotch tape tin there, so that is a big collector's item amongst
Yes.
our group of people that like mid-century things and kitschy things and things of that era. And so that's really a fun collectible if any of you guys are looking for something that you can find thrifting and find yard selling and stuff like that. They're not that expensive, and they look so cute at Christmas. And
Oh yeah, people love to
everything.
just like put those in baskets or whatever around their house.
I think that speaks to, and look at the big Kleenex box. I think it speaks to the detail of the show to have her drawer filled with stuff that,
I
from
agree.
the period.
I agree. So we see that she has a small infatuation with Pete. Otherwise she wouldn't have put that postcard in her
Yeah,
drawer,
and
right?
the song that's playing, was that what you were going to say? The song in the background is something about dreaming. I can dream, can't I?
Yeah,
I'll-
dream on, I think.
Yeah,
is-
dream on.
I got you.
Well, I just heard an interesting thought about that.
Okay.
The front of the postcard is Niagara Falls, right? So, and then in the doctor's office, somebody was really grasping, I think, but in the doctor's office, Peggy, after she is kind of violated by this doctor, she like loses herself in the images on the calendar,
Right.
which are water scenes.
Oh.
And so then all those men come by her and everything, and she opens up the door and she's staring at this postcard,
Interesting.
kind of losing herself in the water
Okay.
landscape kind of images. And I think we should watch for that through the rest of the show. I don't know if it's
Okay.
going to pan out, but we'll see.
I'll buy that.
I like it.
I'll buy it. All right. So then we transition again to the ladies' room. This is our third and final scene and in a ladies' room of the episode. Peggy goes in, and again, we have a woman in there sobbing. But this time, Peggy takes Joan's advice, goes by example, ignores the lady crying, looks at herself in the mirror, sort of, shuffles her shoulders, puts her shoulders back. And
dusts herself off.
That's right. And decides she's going to go back to work.
She's not going to cry in the ladies' room.
That's right. She pulls herself together, and she's going to be okay.
She's really kind of establishing what kind of girl she's going to be, in the workplace.
That's right.
There's not too much times probably that we're going to criticize the show. I just have a small criticism.
Okay.
It's
Is
just
it her bangs.
yeah, especially her bangs. No, I think they should have ended the episode with that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's personal.
Well,
they should just shuffle it around and
they have an
end
interesting ending.
A great ending at the end.
Let's
like
get
a
to
last
that.
Scene.
Yeah.
Let's get to that. Okay, so next scene, we see Betty at the shrink. She made it. So she's at the psychiatrist's office, laying on a table, talking. You can tell she's a little bit nervous. She's telling the doctor that she doesn't sleep well. You can just tell that she's sort of nervous about the whole thing.
Look how beautiful she is.
Yeah, she's nervous and beautiful, and she is just kind of rambling. She's talking about the bomb and nightmares. She's speculating about why people would come to the psychiatrist, and she mentions again for I think it's the third time, maybe it's the second time of this episode, that her mother died recently.
Yes,
and which is significant because. What were you going to say about that?
Well, she takes her watch off. So, in the scene just minutes right before this screen capture was taken, she is fiddling with her watch and she takes it off. And she says, this is the quote. She says, "My mom always told me it's not polite to talk about yourself." So she says that as she's taking her watch off. So it's a reference to her mom, who has just passed. And Dawn has said this sort of the same line twice already in this episode, that I don't like to talk about myself. And so now she's saying it. My mom always told me that it's not polite to talk about yourself. So she distances herself from that watch, which is a gift from Dawn. It's almost like she's taking off that, and that's like her barrier, the barrier between her and her shrink. So she gets rid of it, and then she lights a cigarette, and then she begins to open up, and she says the line, "We're all so lucky to be here."
That's my title for the show.
Okay. I like it. We're all so lucky to be here. So I just think that that's a really symbolic gesture of her taking off that watch that Dawn has just given her, because, she got her way. She got to go to the shrink. She's taking it off. She's letting herself go. And now she's ready to talk. I like it. We're all so lucky to be here.
Yes.
All right. We're almost done. Then we go to Midge's apartment again for the last time. So we've been to Midge's apartment several times this episode. But this time, she has a terrible wig on this time, Laura.
It's really bad.
I think she's had 3 wigs on this whole episode.
They talk about her wig, and I don't like this one. I don't like the way she looks in this one.
So they're just talking. This scene is really not all that important. I think it's interesting that I think Dawn's in bed in this episode, and she tells him, "You stink," which I think is funny because the episode is also revolved around deodorant and deodorant ads.
Yeah, and did you know back when Peggy was talking to the boys about going to lunch, when Joan asked her to go to lunch, she goes, "Well, they do smell nice."
That's true.
And somebody else renamed the episode that.
They sure do. They do smell nice. I like that. And then he says the line again that Nikki said earlier to her. He says, "What do women want?"
Which is what I would rename the episode. What do women want?
And then he goes on to say, "Any excuse to get closer," which of course makes her swoon. So,
well, yeah, because it's his genius. He's just had this light bulb moment and had a brilliant thought just come to him. And I mean, it's a great ad line for deodorant.
It is. So now we have a bookend type of scene. This is the same restaurant. What was the restaurant again?
Toots Shore.
Toots. We're back at Toots. This time it's just this time it's just Dawn and Betty.
This is Betty's reward at the end of the day. She's been to the doctor. That's the dress she was wearing in the doctor's office.
She orders a gimlet. You're going to see her order more gimlets. I think that's her drink of choice. And of course,
gimlet.
And then Dawn has his old fashioned. There's a part where they've ordered their drinks, of course, and then she also wants a tomato juice. And there's a scene where she's squeezing a lemon into the tomato juice, which is gross to me. But Dawn is looking at her doing that, like almost like bewildered. Like he has just this weird look on his face as she's squeezing this lemon. And I asked Nikki and Laura, I was like, what do you think he's thinking there? And you said that you thought maybe he was seeing that her hands were working correctly.
Yeah, that's one thing I thought.
Just an observation. But he does have a very interesting look on his face in this scene.
Laura, did you have another thought about that? I thought we disagreed about that. Okay.
Okay. All right. Last scene. They get home.
Yeah, they get home and they've had a lovely time, and she seems really happy. He is so pleased with himself because he has finally figured it out. Any excuse to get closer. I'll take my wife out and pay attention to her and talk to her and treat her well. And lo and behold, she's happy. And so he's pleased. They go home. You think everything's fine, and he gets on the phone and he's calls somebody in the middle of the night. Turns out it's her psychiatrist, and turns out that, which I think this is another shocker from the time period that's accurate, there was no HIPAA, and you are practically still property of your husband at this time. I mean, we just barely could vote. And so he is like her caretaker, her guardian, and calls the doctor and expects a full report from the doctor about his wife. And
it's so bad.
It's
so
cringe.
cringy.
Yeah.
Ugh.
And so the doctor's like, oh, your wife is a very nervous woman.
Very anxious young woman.
Anxious. And so he's concerned about that. And so here comes the camera's panning out. We're ending the episode. The camera's moving back from...
Sorry about that.
The camera is moving back from Dawn's office, pulling back.
Yeah, Dawn shuts the door.
Shuts the door. The camera's coming down the hall, and it focuses into the kitchen at the stove, the oven, and that's the last scene. The music's playing over the top, and we are just focused on that oven as the music plays out. And here, I think, is the fourth example of us in the ladies' room.
The kitchen.
Also the ladies' room.
Yes.
Because the ladies' room doesn't have to mean bathroom. It's just literally a room for the ladies, which, typically is a bathroom because they congregate there and talk to each other. It's the only place they really can. But this is also Betty's room, the ladies' room, the kitchen.
And I want to step further, and you guys disagree with me here. But earlier in the episode where Dawn is saying something like, why wouldn't you be happy? Only unhappy people want to see a shrink. I've given you this life. A woman's job, quote unquote, in that time, make dinner, make me a sandwich, and make me a baby. And that's the perfect representation of an oven, is to get in the kitchen, a bun in the oven, make me a sandwich and make me a baby. That's all you're good for. So I feel like I just feel like that's symbolic in that way as well.
Yes.
You guys may disagree, but that's how I feel.
Especially if Betty had been pregnant here, that would have been perfect.
Yeah.
I wish that she was, because that would have been more perfect. But
guys, I hope you're enjoying this podcast. We would love for you to follow wherever you're listening to your podcast. We would also love for you to come over to YouTube, subscribe to our channel, like this video, leave us a comment below. Let us know what your title for the episode would be. Again, mine was Greetings from the Wettest Place on Earth. Nikki, what was yours?
What do women want?
And Laura?
What was mine? Oh, we're all so lucky to be here.
We're all so lucky to be here. So again, guys, thank you all so much. And as always, make sure you stay tuned to see what Fatbird finds next. And we will see you next time.
Bye, everybody.